Norm Champ, it's great to have you here in our DC America First studios.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we just wrapped a really exciting event upstairs, American Leadership in the Digital Finance Revolution. We heard from the chair of the SEC, Paul Atkins. Talk to us about what this means, some of the takeaways from the event. What does it mean, American leadership in the digital finance revolution?
So I think President Trump, in his January executive order, really laid out the agenda, which is that the United States should be leading around digital asset innovation, however if that's cryptocurrency that we're going to pay for things with, but also if we're going to tokenize securities or other things. He mentioned, Senator Bernie Moreno with the tokenization of auto titles, so making it easier to move titles around, and that we should be the leader in all of those things. Unfortunately, there's really been, in the federal government, prior to the Trump administration, a hostility towards this kind of innovation with crypto and digital assets. And I think what the president said is, look, I want a whole of government approach to make sure that we are the leaders in this area, wherever it goes. And I think that's part of the point. This is about innovation, and we will see where that innovation takes us. If I knew, I'd probably be a billionaire or something, but we need that space for innovation to occur and make sure we all, and who knows, right? So now if you can get your car title on blockchain, great. Who knows what that'll be later. But the important thing that we have that space to innovate and that we have a rational regulatory framework by the federal government around that activity, which the president emphasized. And today in his remarks, Chairman Atkins talked in particular about 50 state licenses that people have to have for certain digital innovations. Maybe we could get that down to one federal license that might, enable, rather than trying to have 50 states. By the way, 50 states having to come up with their own ideas on how to regulate, but also companies having to comply with 50 state regulations. So I think it's really about fostering innovation, continuing innovation in this area within a good, rational federal framework.
And we hear the administration speak about it in the golden age of cryptocurrency, digital assets. What does that mean to the everyday American who may not have it on their radar? It's a lot of younger men that are more invested in this space. I think it's like 14% of the population is really knowledgeable about it, according to Gallup. What do you think that means for everyday folks?
I think for everyday people, maybe I would probably think in terms of cryptocurrencies on the one hand, and then other digital asset innovation on the other. 100%, it is the golden age for both. They are innovating rapidly. I think on the digital asset side, again, with the auto title type, example, I think all of us will be able to access certain documents, processes, you name it, via digital networks that will make it a lot easier to do so and to make things a lot more efficient. So I think for everyone, probably lots of efficiency. Cryptocurrency itself and sort of, as a means of exchange, obviously lots of issuances, but we haven't seen where that could go because the Biden administration pursued basically an unrelenting litigation war against those currencies and against those products. So now that we are going to get the federal government out of the way and into a better framework, I think we can then let it all develop, and we will see. As again, I don't know if anyone really knows where it will go, but I do think the technology is extremely exciting.
It's very exciting. We can't wait to see what's ahead. And you were recently appointed chair of AFPI's Financial Freedom Initiative, Norm. Talk to us about what that means, financial freedom for Americans.
So if you think about the American people, the hardworking people in this country, they are earning money through work, they are saving and investing, and they're doing so for the most important of life's goals. They want to educate their kids, they want to have a secure retirement, they want to buy a house, whatever it might be. All of these hardworking Americans are saving for these important goals. We have a wonderful capital system, as Paul Atkins, the chair, said in his remarks. And that system is meant to provide opportunity for those people to invest for those goals. The only problem is that we have an alphabet soup of regulators at the federal level around all sorts of these financial markets and financial services that every person in this country relies on. I mean, it's hard to even get them all. SEC, CFTC, FDIC, Fed, comptroller, national insurance, or NCUA, national credit. I mean,
a lot of acronyms.
It is a lot of acronyms. And unfortunately, not very coordinated with regulation. And the answer is always more regulation, right? No matter what happens, what crisis, even if a crisis shows that regulation wasn't working, let's have some more regulation. As they always say,
right.
Only in government do you get more budget when you fail, right? And so we have had this creep of regulation, and what it's doing is it is really damaging our markets that all of those hardworking Americans depend on. The example I always use, in the 1990s, there were around 8,000 public companies that all of us could invest in our 401ks and IRAs. Now there's roughly 4,000. The Wilshire 5,000 index was supposed to be the 5,000 US stocks that the American people could invest in because there's enough volume and so forth. There's 3,300 stocks in the Wilshire 5,000 stock index, right? We are very short of good investment opportunities for the American people. All of us are crammed into very few stocks. That's increased volatility in our markets. You saw when President Trump announced the tariffs, we had terrible volatility in the markets. And now, of course, markets are at all-time highs, right, because the policy's working. But we need to make sure that we take care of our capital markets. We push back against all of this regulation by these regulators. So we're really about four things. One is identifying facts like those and making sure we get them. The second thing is do research, identify those facts. Get those facts out there so that people understand that this affects their everyday goals, their everyday life. Three, we are interacting with regulators, pushing back on harmful rules, encouraging changes, doing all of the things that would try to help the American people. And if it comes to it, we will. We obviously have a very active litigation group here at AFPI.
Yes.
If it comes to it, we may challenge, rules or either past rules or future rules. But I think in general, making sure we're working off the facts and get them out there, make sure that we are interacting with the regulators to encourage freedom, encourage less regulation, more opportunity for Americans. That's the mission.
That's probably a heavier lift than you make it sound, Norm. When you speak to Americans, what kind of a timeline would you think it would be before they can actually expect tangible results out of some of that work?
So that's a great question. There have been so many rules piled on over the last decades, much less the last 4 years with the Biden administration and the sheer number of rules that they passed. I think that repealing all of those rules is a huge task, as you said. And I think it's important that, and I thought Chairman Atkins today, many of the ideas he mentioned were so, apropos for where we are. So he mentioned, for instance, perhaps an innovator could come to market with an innovative product, be allowed a certain exemption for offering that product, but maybe there's some controls around that. So they have to report to the SEC and they have to, and something like that. Freeing up that space where people can innovate and increase the investment opportunities for Americans. Because my fear is that if we just sit around and try to repeal every rule that has been passed by these bureaucrats over the last decades, that will take us the rest of the century. And we just don't have the time, right? Our adversaries and competitors out there in the world are moving and doing their own things. And we've got to take care of our financial system and make sure that it works for hardworking, everyday Americans.
Well, as this work takes place, Norm, before we let you go here, any guidance, any advice, anything you'd point out to folks out there to say, watch for this, keep your eye on what's ahead?
So I'll just, a very concrete example of what I'm talking about. The administration obviously now is engaged in work towards this end. A very tangible thing that's happening. So the FDIC, which provides bank insurance, you've probably seen their signs, when we used to go into banks. I don't know if anyone goes into a bank anymore.
That's true.
But, the FDIC under President Trump just proposed a rule to raise all sorts of monetary thresholds at which certain regulations kick in. Those monetary thresholds were made up 25 years ago and had never been raised for inflation. So the proposal is to raise them and then have them go up with inflation. So the beauty of that is, really, if you boil that down to Main Street America, that means that small banks in the United States will have less regulation, less of the regulation that's applicable to the big banks, which means they can make more loans in your community, right? They can lend to the real estate office, to the new restaurant, you name it, right? And so I think AFPI, I'm highly confident, is going to put in a comment letter supporting that deregulatory rule. And that could be something, if that's in effect very quickly, say next year, I think you will see the ability of small banks to lend to small businesses, which is the growth engine.
It'll be a game changer for
Yes.
Main Street America. We love to hear that. Well, Norm Champ, so glad again to have you down here from New York in our America First Studios in DC. Thanks for your time today.
Great to be here.